Good afternoon, welcome. This is the Marion City Council work session for Tuesday, December 17, 2019. First on our agenda marked for a presentation this afternoon is Nick Glue with Medco. I better get one. Welcome.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is just our quarterly update to the council on a few things that we've been working on. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about a new thing that we've rolled out that's not necessarily directly related to the things that we talk about in this room with development, but is a huge component to our strategies related to workforce development through our Community Promise initiative. So I'm just going to give you I'm going to take you a little bit through the process that we facilitate now in 100% of classrooms in both the Marion and Linn-Mar school districts. So this is an activity that we do with 8th graders. So we are in 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th, and 12th grade classrooms. This is an activity we do in 8th grade. I'm going to take you to 8th grade because I think it allows you to see how what I'm going to show you with our new career pathways documents, how it all makes sense, okay? So this will be fun. Let's all pretend we're 8th graders here today. But once my presentation stops, you need to be adults again. So anyway, this is our website, communitypromise.org. If we're in a classroom with students, everybody has a computer. Everybody goes to the students portal. Once they get in there, we take them through an assessment process, okay? Students are assessed almost to death in today's classrooms, but we do an assessment with them as well to help them understand what careers might match their passions and interests. So we are fully integrated with the state's Future Ready Iowa initiative, and our website directs them to an assessment tool that lives on that site. So we go through a 60-question assessment. The kids are directed to different career types based on how they answer those questions. So here you see finance, business management, marketing. It tells them how well they're matched to each of those categories. In this illustration, you click on finance. It allows them to continue to dig deeper within that until you actually get to specific jobs. So in this case, you see a loan officer listed there. They can click on that. They can understand median salary information. They can understand how many job openings typically exist in this role. And just to let you know, we set up this site to only show them data within that map area there. So while we talk about Community Promise being I call it a workforce retention strategy, we're trying to retain our youth. We're trying to retain the next generation of workforce. So therefore, we're trying to help them understand what this job looks like here. They could manipulate the site to have the data show them what it looks like in California or New York or anywhere in between, but we show them data based on a 60-mile radius from the classroom that they're sitting in at the time. So there's all kinds of different information that they can find within this site. They can find what education is required for this job, what % of the workforce has different types of education who works in this particular role. But the thing we're most excited about is then we can bring them back to our website. So we were looking at a finance-related job on the Future Ready Iowa platform. We come back to the Community Promise website, and within what we call our job profile database, here you're looking at all of the finance-type positions that our local business partners have put forth to showcase to our students. Job profiles are high-demand jobs that companies are always seeking talent for, and it helps kids understand what those jobs are, what type of salary might exist, benefit packages, what's the culture like at their company, and then it further gets into what type of education and training is needed for a student to be qualified for that particular job. Now at the bottom of each of these job profiles are 2 buttons, and I know they're hard to read, but they're these 2 light blue buttons. One of them says Linn-Mar Career Path Curriculum. The other one says Marion Career Path Curriculum. So again, let's think I'm in 8th grade. I'm at a point where I'm being asked, here, what do you want your 4 years in high school to look like? And in a lot of ways, that's a pretty overwhelming thing to answer when you're that early on in your academic career. So in this particular instance, let's pretend we clicked on the Linn-Mar Career Path Curriculum. That brings this document up that we have developed together with our school counselors, and it's basically a playbook for a student interested in pursuing a career, in this case, in finance. So at the top there, and again, I apologize for the size, but you can go look at these on our website. The top, it's high school courses offered at Linn-Mar High School that support this career pathway. On the right-hand side, it's job shadows and internships that they can have access to that support that career path. We get into high school clubs and organizations, CTE courses that are offered at the high school, Kirkwood Career Academies that at some point might make sense for a student to pursue. And then as we scroll on down, it will begin to talk about the different levels of education that are available in our region. And with those different levels of education, what are the jobs that they could get if they just got a certificate or a 2-year program? And what's the salary in the region for that? Same thing with a bachelor's degree. What are the jobs that need a bachelor's degree? And the other nice thing is this is the STEM document. All of these are interactive. So down at the bottom, it's kind of cut off. But if you want to explore more careers that aren't listed here, you can do that, and it takes you back to the website to show you more information. These are things that as we are in classrooms with our teachers, they have become tremendous tools. And so we believe as we're trying to equip kids, not just to be successful in careers anywhere, but again, we're trying to tie them back to the jobs in their own backyard and then show them pathways right in front of them that they can pursue to be successful here. It's been a great competitive advantage for us. And to be quite honest, there's a lot of people that have looked to see what Linn-Mar and Marion in our community have pulled off, and frankly beginning to model a lot of the same work. So this is just a tool that I wanted to share with you all. We talk about community promise a lot, and this is a brand new thing. These will be incorporated actually into the course catalogs next year. I mean, the schools are all in helping to support these, and we're really excited about it. So that's just something I wanted to share with you real quickly. I'm going to advance through a couple slides here. As I wrap up here today, last time I presented to you, I provided just kind of a where are we at as a community so far from a development standpoint. I want to close with that information real briefly. So year to date, you can see through November, about $72.5 million of new construction starts. I can't remember if when I showed you this earlier in the year, we had both of those big months in June and August. As you know, this is a school build year, so the way that we record these statistics, those are the 2 new intermediate schools that started. Where we were at this time a year ago was $65 million in new industrial commercial starts. So it goes to show, if you take the schools out of it, this has been a little bit of a down year from a new construction standpoint. But nevertheless, that's what these charts are looking like. November was a nice strong year to begin to wrap up the construction season. From a pipeline standpoint, this is a report we track. The green is probably the number that I watch closest because it's an indicator of what activity is out there that we're continuing to work with. We call the green active prospects. As we get in, this is kind of the details of that chart, but I wanted to just briefly talk through some examples of what our projects are right now that we're working with. As Mr. Jensen would know, I'm just going to highlight the ones in bold. We are beginning to pursue the idea of constructing a speculative industrial warehouse building out in the Marion Enterprise Center. The board has me working on an RFP to help facilitate that process and hopefully find a development partner to construct that. We believe, based on projects that we've tracked and the real estate that many of these projects are looking for, that there's an opportunity to perhaps bring a speculative building to the marketplace. So watch for more of that coming hopefully in 2020. There's a project that we've continued to track in the Uptown area. The challenge is it's a critical tool that's missing that it needs is the Workforce Housing Tax Credit program. It's a program that essentially is oversubscribed annually and frankly right now is being slanted towards supporting rural communities. While we have many of the same challenges, obviously in Iowa you have that urban-rural conversation that happens each year, but that workforce housing tax credit's a critical tool to projects here. There's a equipment sales and service operator that we're in conversations with, project out in the MEC. We do have an option in place for a potential project out in the MEC with a local electric contractor. A few other just brief things you can see there. Existing manufacturer expansion, a pretty decent sized project that sits in the pipeline. Another larger scale storage facility is probably the best way to describe it. About a $10 million project that's out there in our pipeline as well. And then an opportunity that we're pursuing in the state of Illinois with a relationship that we've developed with a current company that we have here in our community. So that's just a snippet of some of the activity that's out there. And so I guess what that to me says is we still feel pretty good about 2020. As folks begin to maybe argue different characteristics of our things slowing down, our pipeline would not indicate such. So we feel positive going into the new year. This is also a time of year that just like you all are working through strategic planning, we've been updating our playbook. So 1 year ago, I was standing right here and sharing with you some of our initiatives. One of the big things that we talked about was adding staff, our new investment drive, and lots of things within that. So this is the document we shared a year ago. These were our 5 high-level bullet points that we focused on in 2019. This morning, our board of directors reviewed kind of our initial update to the 2020 playbook. These are the 5 bullet points, and then I will share with you. We don't need to talk about these today, but I'll just share with you copies as far as some strategy under each of those 5 bullet points that we'll be focusing on in 2020. So if any of you look at those and have questions, please let me know. You'll also note specifically we are very aware that many of the strategic planning items that you all discussed in your process perhaps involve us working together on some items. So we were very intentional to put in there aligning to some strategic priorities that you all come up with. But we equally want to share with you the things that are going on because we believe in some ways perhaps some of the things that you've discussed we do have some strategy for, and we just want to do a better job communicating that. So if you haven't had a chance, check out our new website. Emily and our team just completed that. So it's a great external marketing tool for the community that we're still wrapping up. And with that, I am done. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions for Mr. Glue? Yes.
And the community promise has really blossomed. It's exciting to see. Do you have any thoughts about partnering with the Regent schools or community colleges? Because if the goal is to retain the workforce, they're even closer to it.
Yep. So we have an advisory team that really helps us with this program. Kirkwood is at the table. I mean, when we developed Community Promise from the beginning with our K-12 administrators, Kirkwood was at the table. So the Regents level, I guess we haven't gotten to that point, but definitely the community colleges are engaged in the work that we're doing.
So it would be, because you had talked about being able for 8th graders to look at opportunities, so then at the community college level, when students are looking for work, is the goal that they can also then plug in and see jobs in the 60-mile radius that might be available to them? I know colleges have their own thing like that, but in terms of, your goal in 2020 was really making Community Promise like a national level. So I'm just wondering how much you want to scale that up.
Yeah, so you're asking about kind of the students that are at the community colleges today, right?
Ready, who are ready for a job, who are maybe looking at the newspaper, the internet, and all of that.
We don't have any strategies that are specifically targeted to that age of individuals. However, obviously, the more years that we're engaged in this work here, naturally those students are going to become that population. And with our pursuit grants, for instance, that's a tool that we're offering to students to be able to help pay for some of that community college education after they're out of high school. So perhaps indirectly we're engaged with that, but we're not necessarily out and engaged. We're focusing mainly on the K-12 strategy right now.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks.
Other questions for Mr. Glue? Thank you, and congratulations on how far this organization has come. I think Steve will probably attest also that it's come a long ways, and it's become a vital partner, I think, for the city and for the economic well-being of the city, and we appreciate all the cooperation. It's certainly well worth the annual investment the city makes in Medco. So thank you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Mayor.
The only comment I have when I come to my own mind is, I think it's great exposing the students to the types of jobs that are in this area. I wonder how we can expose all of their parents
Right.
to the jobs that are here. And I think about that because I remember the tours that we used to have about the businesses in the Cedar Rapids, Marion area, and specifically Marion. And if you take people that have lived in Marion for a very long time and you take them to these businesses, they go, I never knew these kind of businesses. Yep. And therefore, the kind of jobs that are here. So I think the student part of it is good. The counselors are essential to getting them to understand not every kid needs a four-year degree. But I also think somehow we got to link the parents into this or have them get access to that.
Great point. They are a key audience. So parents, teachers, and students. So we've always done our development tour. Over the last couple of years, the schools have come to us and said, hey, we love being on these development tours. We think our teachers need to go on these development tours. No offense to teachers. I'm married to one. Kent Stock actually said this. Kent was a former school administrator. He was at one of our initial planning meetings. He said, all teachers know is a classroom. Right. That's where they've been their whole life, right? They're teachers. And so what can we do to equip them to be even better educators by getting them out into the workplace? And so we've now been offered coveted professional development time to facilitate development tours for our teachers over the last couple of years. And then on the parents, I told you about how we're in the classrooms. Right. So again, let's go back to 8th grade one last time. We finish this session in the classroom. When we get back, when Emily gets back from this classroom time, she has essentially a canned email that we have developed that is sent to the teacher whose classroom we were in. They forward that out to all of the parents of the students that we talked to and said, hey, today in your child's class, this happened, these people were here, this assessment was done, and ask them to basically ask their student, what did that result tell you about what might be a good career fit for you? And if they will follow the link and go to our website and tell us what their student said would be a good fit for them, we actually enter them into a drawing, and every quarter we draw a name of somebody that gets a gift card from a local business. It's nothing fancy, but it's intentional to try and encourage conversation at home about this topic.
Right.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a presentation from Marion Leadership in Action. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Peterson. I am a lender with Hills Bank, but today I am here representing the Marion Leadership in Action class of 2019-2020. I'm going to be here to briefly talk about Marion Leadership in Action, our project for this year, and then to make a request of the Marion City Council. So briefly, Marion Leadership in Action through the Marion Chamber is a professional development tool designed for community business members who want to strengthen their leadership skills and to put them to use in the community. Over the last 8 years, each Marion Leadership in Action class has focused on a city beautification project. In alternating years, each class is focused on either the city banners, of which you see an example, or a holiday lights display. The 2019-2020 class project is a holiday light display on 11th Street starting in December 2020 in the area in front of Uptown Snug, Shortsburger, and Bistro 319. Our fundraising goal for this year is $10,000, and this is similar to past amounts. This year we have 3 fundraising channels: personal appeals, and that is each member of the Marion Leadership in Action class asking for donations from friends, families, and from employers. an annual appeal letter that was sent out a few weeks ago, and a small fundraising event at the Peppermint Walk. Something different this year, we've identified giving levels in our annual appeal letter. We've identified 4 giving levels, and each giving level confers a level of recognition to the donor. So, for example, at the Platinum 500 Plus giving level, the donor would be highlighted in an email blast to Chamber members, recognition in the Marion Chamber webpage, Marion Times article, and recognition on the banner displayed at the 2020 Peppermint Walk and Lighting Celebration. So as I said, our target area is 11th Street in front of some businesses such as Scout of Marion, Uptown Snug, and Bistro 319. The picture on the left, it's a little small, but we have something called an image display system, and I'll go over what these are here in a little bit. But in essence, we need a large wall to display an image, so we have that. We also have some possible aerial lighting displays, and we've identified some possible areas where we can put those, as well as some ground displays, some regal snowflakes. Again, and I'll go over what those are in a second. So just an example, sort of a site map of where we may be able to put some of these lighting displays. For the lighting displays, some examples that we have the regal snowflake, which is that one sort of on the right-hand side. For those tech-minded in the audience, the stand's 6.5 feet tall, draws 38 watts of power, and weighs 63 pounds. And it's a ground lighting display. Next, we have an image projection system, and that is the stand to the left-hand side there. The image projection system is 6.5 feet tall, draws 575 watts of power, and has a lamp life of 12,000 hours. The image projection system utilizes something called a gobo, which is that small black square there in the center of the image. It has a pattern on it. The image projection system then projects that image onto, for example, the side of a building or a sidewalk. Those gobos can be purchased individually, so you can purchase different patterns, and so you may be able to use it for other times of the year, not just for the winter holidays. And then lastly, we have some aerial lighting displays. The one on top there is called the Royal Snowflake Skyline. It's 22 feet long and 4.5 feet tall. And the one on the bottom is called the Jeweled Scroll. It is 20 feet long and 5.5 feet tall. Again, those are aerial lighting displays. So for an example, as far as cost, if we were to purchase one of each of these, the total cost would be just under $11,000. And if we were to purchase 2 of each of these, the total cost would be just under $18,000. So if Marion Leadership in Action were to raise the $10,000 and then some matching funds from the Marion City Council, that would equal $20,000. So we would have the funds to purchase roughly 2 of each of these. And so finally, I'm here to ask of the Marion City Council for a resolution approving matching funds for the Marion Leadership in Action Holiday Lights Project in the amount not to exceed $10,000. Are there any questions?
Questions? I have a question of our city manager. We've done this matching annually, and does that remind me? Is that that comes out of hotel motel, or what's that? What's the source of the funds?
We have done it with hotel motel in the past, and then at times we've also budgeted for it in the communications budget.
Okay. And is that something that's currently budgeted?
We have some money in the communications budget, but I need to look back and see how much.
Okay. So, I mean, is this going to be voted on Thursday? Will that be coming up at a future meeting?
It's set for Thursday, but we'll know that information before then. We'll verify.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's no secret holiday lights are a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I think we could do a lot more in terms of holiday decorations. So thank you for taking on the project, and Good luck with the campaign. You have my support.
Well, thank you very much, and happy holidays.
Okay, we have another presentation on the agenda for tax increment financing request, Mojo Properties.
I'm Matt Olmsted. I'm with Mojo Properties and Olmsted Construction. My brother and I are partners on the Mojo Properties and the construction company, Jason. That's my brother. So just a quick update on this project that we've been working on in the Uptown District. It's the Bistro 319 building along with the condo project on the second floor. There's also a parking ramp in the back of the building. So this is formerly the ESCO building, and also the Shermco was the last people that were there before we renovated into the Uptown, into the Bistro 319 restaurant and condos. So this picture on the left was the initial entry vestibule area as you came into the Shermco building. The picture there on the right is the renovated Bistro 319 restaurant. Kind of a significant change in difference there. This is the exterior and second floor portions of the building where the condos currently are under construction and residing. There is 2 that have been completed and 2 that are still under renovation. Basically what we're looking to do is add an elevator in here so that we can get some more traction with the units. There's been some discussion with the city that there's a significant request for downtown living, and this we think would add with the ADA accessibility and as far as that goes. This was these are basically the existing second floor. There was an open atrium, office space, whatnot as far as the Shermco space went. This was post that after demolition. This is just basically all completely gutted down to the shell. Just a old, basically barn structure with wood. Some of it we left exposed, some of it we had to cover up as part of the building code requirements to separate the commercial spaces from the residential spaces. This is one of the finished units on the second floor after that demolition. Currently there is 2 that are completed. This is the second unit. This is the first unit. They're both approximately 1,800 square feet with 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, master suite, open kitchen, dining, and then the balconies out the back. There's 2 more units that are basically framed up. The demising walls are all installed, but they're a bigger space with some more options. So being there for sale, we've just kind of left those open because the floor plans are a little bit more up in the air. You can add 2 to 4 bedrooms basically. There's just more options. So rather than kind of direct somebody as to how they want to lay out, we decided that we'd let them kind of pick and choose as far as that goes. So our investments, originally we basically had budgeted for some ADA, obviously upgrades to get to in and out of the building. There's facade and just building maintenance upgrades that we've done to the building, new storefronts, things like that. We've also added a new water line, new basically sewer, water line, HVAC upgrades, heating, cooling, electrical is all new. New sprinkler system, so it's more or less was gutted down to the shell and completely redone from there on. Some of the other additional things that we've done is obviously the second floor we did the same thing with new HVAC and mechanical system, sprinkler system, code required demising walls and floors for fire protection. And then so more or less we put somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million in private funds in the renovations, in addition to the purchase of the property, and then that helped to support the urban housing initiative that as part of the Uptown Marion District. So basically what we're looking for is help with the elevator, which is that $65,000 some change there, and that will obviously greatly assist with the marketing of the condos as well as ADA accessibility and kind of upgrade for some feedback that we've received from the city that they're looking for more downtown housing and some more ADA accessibility as far as that goes on the second floor. So these are right above the Bistro 319. There's a parking garage in the back that has 5 parking stalls in it. And then we also have 5 spaces on the Iowa Realty property that also go along with that, that's right behind where the overhead door is for the property. That's really all I have. Thanks for having me. If anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
I will just note that I have turned over the gavel to Mayor Pro Tem. So.
Thank you, Your Honor. Any questions for Mr. Olmsted? We'll start here to my left. Ms. Cadelia?
Thanks. Benefit from, sorry. How many people would benefit from the elevator other than the residential? Is there access to anything else that the public would?
There's
use
just
these
4 condos on the second floor that would be the ADA accessibility through the garage space in the back parking area.
And 2 are currently occupied and not in need of the elevator?
2 are a short-term lease. One is a 2-year that's on about 18 months into it. The other one is only a 4-month lease for someone that's building a house currently. And that ends in February. And then there's the 2 that are basically partially under construction. So there's 2 finished, 2 partially under construction, and then that's basically where the elevator would get to, is just the second floor to that space.
And then did you say that one of these is an Airbnb?
We have used the Airbnb on the first 2 units. When the one went under contract with a 2-year lease, we moved to the second one and have had really good luck. It's been a lot of really good feedback with the downtown environment and uptown district. With as far as those, we've had tons of great feedback that people are not aware of all the stuff that's in downtown Marion, and they're from all over. We've had people from Alaska, Texas, California. It's rather odd.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Olmsted? Mr. Galoo, go ahead.
I would just add one point of perspective. This particular component of the project, if it would have been included when we had initially did this development agreement, the economic development policy would have treated an ADA accessible improvement like this as an automatically qualifying expense for incentive. So we would have incorporated it into the original development agreement from the beginning. At the time, that was not a tool that they felt like they needed to incorporate. So just a little perspective, just from a policy standpoint. I hope we've outlined that well in the packet that we've included in the council packet.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn the meeting back over to the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on with the consent agenda. There are a couple items on page 1 and then all of page 2 that are not marked for discussion. If there's anything in particular anyone would like to discuss, please point that out at this time. Yes, Ms. Gadela?
Yep, just a question on the department reports. I first want to start off by saying what a great overhaul. It's like a third, I think, of the volume that it usually is. So, I appreciate all the work that's been done to try to whittle information down into the real succinct nuggets that I think that we're looking for up here. Question on the front page under admin, as I was looking at the updates on the comp study, the strategic plan, the capital improvement plan, and then the budget process, they all are related, and I'm just hoping and wondering if we can make sure that we're looking at all the information as we're deciding what the budget parameters are. And maybe this says that. I don't know. I have arrows and questions, and my apologies. I wasn't able to meet with the city manager prior to the meeting today. But will we be able to look at all of those things to help inform us at the budget meetings and not after the fact? Is the timing, I guess my question is on the timing there.
Yeah, we've completed an initial review of the strategic plan, and as soon as we get that next draft back from the strategic planning consultant, we're going to provide it to the departments and to the city council so that you have a chance to peruse it in advance of the budget work sessions. There's a couple of items in there that we wanted to bring back to council anyway for some clarification, just to make sure that as we start to propose work plans and things built around those, that we are on the right track. back, just another spot check related to that. With the CIP, the first of the 2 budget work sessions will be, that'll be CIP day. We'll be walking through that. And then the second work session would be planned to be the operating budget day. We just got the initial draft of the compensation study. We've got an internal meeting to go over that tomorrow, and then another one coming up on Friday. So as soon as we complete that review, we'll push that back out to the City Council.
Thank you. I think having all those things in concert, it's like spinning plates. I think it'll make a ton of sense and really help us when we make the tough decisions that may have to be made at the budget time to be able to look at all of these really large rocks, if you will, to help fulfill the picture. So thank you for lining it all up.
Yep.
That's all I had.
Any other items on page 1 or 2? And then also number 2 on page 3 before we get to number 3. Any questions on that? All right, number 3, under parks.
We have, Your Honor, we have Carleen Hummel here today. As we head into early winter, what better time to do a recap of the swimming pool season? So we'll let Carleen get her presentation up here and
Welcome.
go. Thanks, Carleen.
Thank you. And I apologize. Unfortunately, I'm starting to get a sore throat, so hopefully I can make it through this. But I just want to thank you all for allowing me a few minutes to kind of go over our pool season that we had. Our season runs Memorial Day Monday through Labor Day Monday, in which we had one complete day where we were not open due to weather, and then we had a few days where we either had to open late because we had an early morning storm come through, or we did close early. But otherwise, for the most part, we were open every day. Priority for us, a major one, is safety. We really, really are proud that our staff, we do a lot of training. We do 3 nights of extensive training before the pool even opens, and then we hold weekly staff meetings where we're still going over practicing rescue, CPR, first aid. We're also utilizing our Marion Fire Department. They come in and meet with us at least once in the summer, just things that new staff, what we would have to expect from them should we have an emergency, or how we handle things, because a lot of times they may have staff turnover too, and the things that we would do. So like I said, we really take safety as a major priority for us, and thank goodness the last couple of years we have not had any serious injuries. It's ice packs, Band-Aids, and then also one other good one was we didn't have any fecal incidents, so it's another good thing. So just briefly, I'm going to go over a little bit of our usage for the 2019 season. We had 20,624 total in attendance come in through our swimming pool. Those numbers do not include the daily attendance of swimming lessons and things like that. So that's actually passes, lap swim, and then daily admissions. We were up 1%, so 176 more swimmers over the year before. And if you'll notice, we had a 9% decrease from 2018 to 2017. So we did an upswing again there, which is a good thing. Our passes, our numbers for pass sales continue to dwindle and go down, and I will explain that here in a little bit, a couple of reasons why we feel that is happening. We sold 156 family passes, which is down 10% from last year, and then if you compare it over the last 2 years, it's roughly a 24% decrease. And then our individual passes, we sold 63, down about a 23%, roughly 50% over the last 2 years. Our daily admissions, we did have an increase from our 2018 season, so we had a little over, almost 12,000, I should say, that actually paid daily admissions. So that's just kind of a little nutshell of how our revenues came through as far as admission and numbers coming in. As I did say, we had a minimal increase on our attendance. One thing that we did lose, and this was something I stated a few years ago when I gave my report, that if we would ever lose the daycares, we would lose a considerable amount of our revenues as far as passes and things like that. So in the last 2 years, we've had a major daycare that is pretty much, they used to go to 5 different sites, and they've dwindled down to 1 site, and they're one of the smaller daycares now compared to when they were the largest daycare and came to the pool 5 days a week between those 5 sites. So as you can see, they used to bring in an over average of 100 swimmers, and within this last year, they brought in daily 45, and they also did not come 5 days a week. They limited their visits coming to the pool. So that calculates we're an average of a little over 1,300 swimmers that we lost just in attendance coming that way. And then that drop in that daycare also affected our swimming lessons. They used to sign up for the 8:15 early time slot, 2 sessions. We would allow them 12 spots out of that 20 for early sign up, and then when we had our mass swim lesson registration, it seemed like the parents who didn't get there the day for the daycares when they turned in early tried to fill those. So we lost between the 2 weeks with that one daycare probably close to 120 of our swim participants. This year, they brought a total of 6 kids for one session compared to over 60 per session before. So that really affects our attendance, but also that's where our pool passes. They used to, that daycare would require the families to either purchase a family pool pass or an individual pool pass. So when you have a large daycare that had over 100 families, you know, breaking out between either buying an individual if they had one child or if they had multiple childs, you can see where that was a big decrease in our pass sales. But our daily admission, like I said, continues to go up, and that's the daily fees, 57%. And that's a trend that a lot of cities and communities are also seeing, is that their pass sales are going down, but their daily admissions are going up, walk-ins. There are so many more opportunities for families to go. Anybody who has children or grandchildren know that there is always something every weekend, every evening. Parents now aren't sending their kids to the daycare as much. They've got the phones, they've got the FaceTime, so they have that interaction. They can have the webcams at home. So there's just a lot more things to do, and then they, instead of buying a family pool pass, they'll take their money and they'll go to the pool one day here, or they'll go up to Cedar Falls, to the aquatic center, or they'll go to Lost Island. So they're finding other options and other places to go other than those pool passes. So just a little comparison, and this is a little bit updated from what you guys have in your packet for the one that you received and filed. So it just kind of gives you an idea of our sales, comparing our pool pass sales. And like I said, we saw that decline between individual and family passes over the last 4 years. It's over, like I said, over within that 4-year period of individual passes, over 50% of those have dropped. And then also our paid admission versus our pass usage. So you can see in the past, pass usage was always greater than our admissions until this last year, where we had almost 12,000 paid compared to the 9,400 that came in just using their pass. Also comparing attendance with revenue. As we know, the more people that come in, the revenue is up. And then as we've seen a decline in our attendance, we've also seen that decline in our revenues. So that's associated, those revenues are with the pass sales and daily admissions. Overall, when we look at our overall budget, total expenditure versus revenues for the last 3 years, comparable that our expenditures, we noticed in the year 2017, our expenditures were almost that $300,000, and compared to this year, we're at that 275, almost 276. Couple of those things I'll explain here in a minute, a couple of reasons why our expenditures went down, and then also, as we know, our revenues. Looking at our revenue and expenditure comparison, we are recouping an average of 45 to 46% between revenue and expenditures. Our swimming lessons, we filled 789 slots, and that was a decrease of 11% to almost 100 kids, and we do know some of that was the daycares. We also did reduce one of our time slots where we offered lessons. We had an 8:15 a.m. slot, our session 4, and we eliminated that one. As you can see, in 2016, we had 42 kids sign up between those 4 levels. In 2018, we had 21. So just a cost initiative for staffing reasons, we took that one out. And then also, like I said, we lost a lot of those daycare kids. And then Linmar continues to do those swim programs through the school PE class. We also offer a recreational swim team in the summer. And in the years, we usually average between that 55 to 65. So this year we were a decrease of 7 swimmers. However, in 2018, we had an increase of 11. So we fluctuate back and forth. Most of our kids are from 6 to 16. We take every swimming level. And they get up and practice bright and early, 6:45 to 8:05 a.m. We do have 3 coaches. Because we take so many different skills and the age levels, we break them into 3 component groups, so we have someone overseeing each one of those groups. And this year we did hold one swim meet. We get a lot of positive feedback from our parents and participants. So it's for fun. One of the events we did hold this year was our back to school night. So this is just one of the photos from back to school night. That far left is a little bit of the obstacle course. So you can barely see there's 2 rescue tubes in there, but they had to like swim under and swim through some hula hoops and then do like a dolphin dive over the rescue tube and different things like that. And then we had other little games and things in the upper pools up above and diving contests and splash contests. We're always looking for additional events. So a few that we've brainstorming for 2020 is Swim Under the Stars. So we're looking at doing some more nighttime swims after hours. 4th of July, we do a fun day, and we're going to expand on that. Christmas in July. We did do a Hawaiian night this year where they did the limbo, and we had some kids dressed up in Hawaiian outfits, and then our guards also dressed up in Hawaiian. And then we're going to renew that partnership with the Heritage Area Agency on Aging. Boy, that's a tongue twister. To do water aerobics. They had a turnover in staff, and so they lost their certified instructor last year. On top of that, we also have some rental groups, some MOUs. So we have 3 groups that we offer MOUs with, and they pay a $20 per hour fee, and they provide their own lifeguards and insurance and come in after hours or bright and early in the morning. And that's the revenue that they generated. So $1,542 is after taxes. We do have to pay taxes on that. And then we also have private rental groups where we provide all of the staff. Average is usually 20 to 21 rentals. However, this year we were up and we had 25 rentals. And then our total revenue generated was just a little over $6,000. A little bit on our pool employees. We had 44 pool employees, and this is just approximately half of them. It just doesn't always fit into everybody's schedules when we do our staff photo. When I started 21 years ago, we had close to 100 employees, and now we're down to the 44. Some of that has to do with some of the federal laws that we have, and then just maintaining and trying to keep those lower numbers. So we had 26 lifeguards, and that is my minimum level or number of lifeguards that I can have to operate the pool. So we have 2 schedules. We have an evening or day, an evening schedule, 13 shifts, 6 days on, 2 days off, and it's a rotating. And we have it so they rotate through and they flip-flop. 1 week is days, 1 week is nights, back and forth. So that 26 is a minimal. We also have 3 head lifeguards, which they also have their lifeguarding and will float into that schedule and fill in as subs, then the managers, cashiers. Our swim aides and WSIs, that's where in the past we used to have numbers where it was 15 to 20 of those, and then we also have our 1 swim lesson coordinator. So you can see over the past couple years, we've gone from a staff of 69 down to 44. Just looking at our staff, we're still a young staff. 43% are either a first or a second year guard. And then we get to that third plus, that's our 36%. A lot of times we'll keep those high school kids, and then those kids that'll go off into college. Unfortunately, the reason we do have kind of that turnover between first and second year is they'll get their lifeguarding, they'll go off to school, and then they will start looking for job shadowing or internships or what's going to pertain into their field. I can recruit the ones who want to be teachers because they work with the kids all day long, which is good. And then another reason why we lot a lower number of staff is a few years ago the federal child labor laws initiated that anyone who was going to teach swimming lessons had to be the age of 15 and have their lifeguarding certification, because they felt that if something would happen, that everyone that's associated with swimming lessons, it has to be at least 15 and have that. And then a 16-year-old, so we can have our cashiers, once they're 16, then they can help with lessons and not have that lifeguarding certification. And of those lifeguards that we have, 6 of them also have their WSI, which means they're certified to teach those Red Cross lessons. And then we also have those 3 swim team coaches. As you're all well aware of, we had that major leak, and this was our first season after the leak repair, which was great. So that's a photo of what the actual leak looked like. We started doing that detection back in the fall of 2017, kind of had some of our lines televised. The way our pool system is constructed, it's really hard to get into those lines. So 2018, we contracted with Burbach Aquatics to come in and consult and help us with some water hold tests, just trying to give us an idea of where this leak could be. We knew the deep end held water, and it was from there on that we had this leak. It got to the point where we just had to fill for the season, and for a second thought we were going to have to cut our losses till fall. But however, we were able to contact American Leak Detection. They brought in a scuba diver, Paul, which was great. He came in, put red dye next to each one of our inlets, and he could just see how the water was sucking out. Of course, he started in the shallow end with those inlets and worked his way back towards the deep end. This cracked leak right here was in the very first inlet coming in from the deep end, so it's right next to where the deep end wall curves down. So it is the very first initial inlet when the water's coming from our filtration system. That's the first pipe down that deep end. And so that he would put the dye there, and as fast as he could syringe it out, it was completely disappearing. So he went in and opened that inlet, and we did a little bit of a blow-up balloon just to kind of slow it down for that 2018 season. And then we came in at the fall of 2018, and Pipe Pro came in and did that repair, replaced that inlet, which was approximately a 2.5-inch crack. A little bit wider than a nickel, but a lot of water could flow through that in no time. And then we also had the water department come in and just look through up above in our baby pool, training pool areas, and they didn't find anything in those. So back to 2019, I'd like to say that we're back to normal minimal loss, which is evaporation, splash out. So let's just fingers crossed that we winter well for the next few years and don't have any more major leaks. So that's a great thing. With that leak, we're going to save on water usage because now we're not losing all that water and we're not using all those chemicals and the extra heat to heat that cold water as source water as we're bringing it in. However, we're still going to have those expenses with utilities still going up. Their utility prices are going up. Chemical prices continue to go up from our suppliers. So, we bit the bullet, or we beat the bullet, actually, and we don't have that leak anymore, which is going to help us immensely on that part. So looking to the future, we want to continue to provide a safe environment for all our patrons, continue to add on those special events, find new and inventive ways that we can bring in revenue, bring in more people. And then we're also going to do a pool feasibility study this winter, which we do have that pool feasibility study schedule on there. And actually, Seth is the one overtaking that project. So I think there was a couple things he wanted to kind of cover on that real quick.
So with the pool feasibility that we're going to be conducting, we issued out a request for qualifications just a couple months ago and received 4 submittals. From those 4 submittals, we felt that there's 2 firms that we felt that were qualified to conduct a feasibility study for the city of Marion, and we'll be issuing out requests for proposals to those 2 firms. We're expecting to get those proposals back in January, and if everything runs smoothly, to be able to award a contract by March and starting the feasibility study in April. The study, we're looking at about like a 9 to 10 month time frame to have it completed. But to help oversee that feasibility study, we're also putting together a steering committee for that. Councilmember Brandt has expressed interest on sitting on that committee, but I do want to invite council members, if you guys have interest in joining the committee, feel free to reach out to myself, Mike, or Carlene, and we would definitely love to have you sit on that. So.
And my last slide is a thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Questions?
Comments?
Let's go ahead.
A couple of comments. First of all, I do appreciate the report and the detail of the report. It's also certain that this is probably the oldest, if one of the oldest, if not the oldest, public pool in Lynn County. Okay, so it's over 30 years old. And again, I remember when it was down at Thomas Park and when it was moved up here on 35th Street. Well, that was a great pool, terrific. But now we are way, way behind the times. Obviously, that's the purpose of the feasibility study.
Correct.
But we also know that it's going to be a number of years before we see a new aquatic park. I don't know, 5, 6, 7, at least somewhere in that range, okay? So if I look at it from that perspective, over the last 10 years, your attendance has gone down 40%. Your revenue has gone down 25%. You're averaging a $160,000 loss. When I was there with my grandchildren a number of times this summer, the splash pad wasn't working. So there's not a lot of, so people are going there just to jump in the water and cool off and splash around. So is there a plan to come up with some capital investment, some improvements of some type to attract more people, to bring people there for the next several years? There's still, that's still a long time for this pool to still be in operation. So if we do nothing, those numbers are just going to continue to flatten out or even go down more. So if we don't do something, I think I'd like to see, are there some ideas or conversation about some upgrades? Not major, but at least something.
So besides the promotional events and doing some of the program special events to attract, to kind of boost the daily emissions, we're also looking within the pool feasibility study as far as, when we're addressing aquatic needs, down the road of what is that stopgap, and we're hoping to address those during the feasibility study to get some guidance as far as, what is that stopgap we can do to our current facility now to, as it sunsets, for whatever the feasibility study finds that we need for an aquatic center. So, to answer your question, we don't have immediate ideas, but we're hoping from the study that we'll be able to pull something to be able to kind of address the needs now to help kind of put a Band-Aid on the current facility. So.
We have 0 slides. You go to the other Cedar Rapids parks that have been upgraded. They have multiple slides, and some of them are fairly tall, and I'm sure a lot of fun. So again, I'm just suggesting that we do continue as part of the feasibility study to at least be cognizant of the fact that there's still a lot of years left here.
And with some of those amenities, it can get pretty costly with we're talking about slides and adding any additional toys or floatables. A lot of those things can get pretty costly, but if there is something that we can do to now to maybe incorporate later on within a new facility, that's kind of what we're looking at for the feasibility. We don't want to just put a capital investment and then just be able to utilize it for 4 years and then move on. So hopefully we can utilize it and properly invest the money into something that's useful.
I do want to add on to that conversation a little bit to some extent what Seth was relating to. We have to be very cautious as far as what we would do as far as those investments in that stopgap period. When we talk about those enhancements that you see in Cedar Rapids and those pools and those upgrades that they did to those pools, those are multi-million-dollar investments that they did in those upgrades. So we do need to be cautious how much we would do when we talk about those stopgap enhancements, if you will. We did some of that just a couple years ago. I don't know how many on council remember, but we did go in. We did do some upgrades as far as adding umbrella areas. That was a request from the public, or from the public to be able to have somewhat of those passive areas. So we did add those umbrellas, did those enhancements, moved the gates back to add more green space, purchased lounge chairs. Again, working with in a traditional lap pool, we are somewhat limited with what we can do without doing that major investment. So we do want to we're walking somewhat of a fine line in this period before we do see that new aquatics center come online. So we are limited with the pool that you have.
And I'm assuming that we always look at the pricing to make sure that, we don't want to price ourselves out of the market, but that it's
definitely a fine line that we walk.
You can rent the entire facility for $200.
Well, actually, Park Board just increased it to 225.
Well, I'm glad,
But
because
still,
I think that's very reasonable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We should increase it.
Right, and there's also, with those other communities I was talking about, there's some communities that are actually lowering their daily admission fee because they're seeing more people are doing walk-ins and their passes, and they're actually decreasing their fee, and then they're going to see how it affects their revenue for this year, but that was something that they're going to do for 2020, so.
Okay. I assumed you're always looking at those things, so.
Correct.
Okay, other questions? Thanks to both of you. Thank you. Okay, the rest of page 3, nothing is marked for discussion. If there's anything in particular anyone has a question about? Okay, we'll move on to the regular agenda. Administrative services. This is an item we've discussed, right? So I'll turn over the gavel.
So you had a chance to hear the presentation from Mr. Olmsted on what they are contemplating for continued improvements to that building. This would be a motion to direct staff to do a memorandum of understanding with them for providing the assistance to help them complete that improvement. Just to provide a little bit of clarification, the city's economic development policy governs how we use tax increment financing resources and what we use them for. And there's generally 2 types of tests that we apply. One is called the but-for test, which is that if the city didn't provide the help, that the project would not be able to proceed. And then the other one is the substantial public purpose test. So for things like ADA improvements to historic buildings, it's tremendously expensive to go in and do those retrofits, but the economic development policy was built around the underlying public purpose of making those improvements. Same thing with things like brownfield remediation. There's an inherent public purpose in remediating brownfields, especially in the central corridor, and also historic preservation activities. So this one falls underneath that classification. The only thing that would be a little unique about this one is that with the way the agreement would be structured, rather than doing it and trying to amend the existing development agreement related to that building, I think the Economic Development Committee and our internal staff recommendation would be for us to do an internal loan, provide reimbursement for the cost of the project, and then recapture the dollars for the internal loan from the entire district. That'll allow us to do it more quickly and to be able to get the project off the ground. It's not something we would typically do for a gigantic project unless it was really unique, but for a smaller one like this, it would be probably, we felt that it would be more cost effective. So same result, but just a little different financing mechanism than the typical rebate agreement that the council is used to seeing.
Thank you, Lon. Any questions for the city manager, Mr. Jensen?
Yeah, question, Lon. In the proposal, and I apologize, I did not read the entire agreement. What percentage of the cost of the elevator are we talking about in this agreement, in this in this MOU?
For those types of things, the city will reimburse 100% of the cost. Same thing with sprinklers, things like that in the historic buildings in the uptown. It's not something we do anywhere, but if you're contemplating an improvement that is not required by the building code, the city will fund the cost of the improvement.
So and I thought that might be the answer. So under what circumstance does that open the door for any project of any type for somebody to come and ask the city to pay for an elevator? Or where's the cutoff line on typically where are we saying this is for ADA compliance, this is for a historical building? I can see a lot of people all of a sudden lining up and saying, well, I want an elevator too. Pay for my elevator 100%, I'll put an elevator in. So where's the cutoff line on where do we pay 100% and where don't we?
It's specifically targeted to historic buildings for retrofit for ADA compliance on historic buildings. I can get you the language out of the policy for how that governs it, but it's restricted to, if I remember correctly, it's restricted to the Central Corridor District first, and then the footprint is further restricted beyond that.
Okay, so there is definition on how it would be what would be approved or come under that guidance.
Yep, and as I would say, it also has to be in excess of code requirements. So if someone's building a commercial building that's above the square footage that would already be required to have sprinklers, they're just going to be required to do that. But if you've got a building that falls below that footprint and there's a public purpose for making sure that it has sprinklers in it, we would provide an incentive to assist with doing that.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Gedalia?
Yep. To my original comment and to piggyback on Steve, I think my discomfort with 100% of this right now is because it would only benefit private residents. It's not an elevator to a second floor of retail shopping. And my fear of anything then in the central corridor is anybody who has a second floor apartment, because we're doing this one after the fact or because we're being asked to, is that it could open the gates to put in an elevator for convenience of somebody, moving furniture, not wanting to carry their groceries. And I understand that if at the beginning of the project this was built in, ADA compliance, I get it. But the public purpose for sprinklers makes a lot of sense to me. The public purpose for a private use elevator for 2 to 4 residents, us paying 100%, I'm having a tough time with it. I know we have a couple more days, and in fairness, I didn't read every detail of the contract, but just thought I'd put my thinking out there on that. I feel like we might be opening the door here. That's all I have.
Any other questions from the council for the city manager? Lon, I'll add my question in here. I feel I'll piggyback on these as well too. I feel as this item makes it more of a marketable product. Does the owner, and I see he's left already, does the owner feel that he cannot move these units because of that? And what doors does that open for potential buyers because of an elevator? I know those units have been for sale for a while, and we appreciate that investment in town, but at the end of the day, we do know that he's sitting on empty units that are not being sold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's the request is due to feedback from potential buyers for people looking at the facility. The specifics about it, if the council wants to put some more parameters around what we would do for elevators. For example, I have a hard time believing that if someone were to come in and they wanted to do an owner-occupied, where they were a single unit above a building, that would not necessarily meet the public purpose test, because it's only benefiting one private property owner and doesn't accrue, the benefits don't accrue to anybody other than the one person who already owns the building. So we may need to look at that if the council has some concerns about opening too wide of a door with it. I can say that with past experience with these, we've only had one elevator that's been done under this program so far. It has not been a high demand item for us. There's a lot of expense associated with operating it and maintaining it after it's installed, which is part of what has kept people from doing it. But we also know that when you're renovating a historic building, they weren't built around these, so it's a lot more expensive than it is, say, to put an elevator in this building. When City Hall was built, I believe if you broke out the elevator, the cost of this one for all 3 floors was right around $100,000. This is a 2-floor one in a smaller facility that's a low-volume, low-use one. So we're just seeking ways to make sure that as these buildings are renovated, knowing that uses may change at some point in the future. This one used to be commercial, now it's going to residential. At some point in the future, it could go back to commercial, that the facility was properly equipped to be able to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Gedalia, did you say you wanted to follow?
Yeah,
Okay, I'll do that, and then we'll take it back to Mr. Glue.
Yep. So for Thursday, if possible, I guess I'd be interested in how many second-story residential units exist in the Central Corridor Historic District, so that we can see what our total exposure could possibly be.
Mr. Glue, would you like to present to the council?
I guess the addition that I would add from a policy perspective, and your question about elevators is a good one. Policy would not allow us to bring a request to the city unless the total investment and increase in valuation in the uptown area was $250,000. For everywhere else, that threshold from a policy standpoint is $500,000. So if this elevator were being brought forth, and we weren't also looking at the fact that within the past couple of years they've invested over $1 million into the project, the elevator as a standalone project would not qualify. we're treating this project kind of in the grand scope of the overall improvements that are being made. So perhaps that helps. If they would just be bringing this and it was ESCO still operating there and saying we want to bring a $60,000 elevator, that would not fit in and of itself. The other thing, and one of the reasons that we are contemplating a whole separate development agreement is, I think you're correct, the units have not leased or sold because that is an identified hurdle to potential buyers. The other thing that's happened is because of the fact that the balance of the second floor has not been built out, the full valuation that we projected that building would get to after these improvements were made has not been realized. So in a lot of ways, this improvement will also help the total building valuation to reach the threshold that we need it to get to in the context of the larger development agreement.
Yeah, I think that helps because there are some then more hoops that someone would need to jump through.
Sure.
Are we guaranteed that Mojo is going to 100% complete this investment that we're basing these projections on? Like they're locked in, they're going to do it? Is there a time frame?
There's time frames that are always put into the development agreements. We do often allow some flexibility with that based on construction schedules. That once they, like for example, we might allow a 10-year rebate on this one. In this case, the Mojo Properties is 90% for 10 years. But when that starts, for the developer to maximize their rebates, they want to do it, they want to kick in year one after the building has reached its maximum value. But there are stipulations in the development agreement for what they will do as far as the number of units that they will build out, the amount that they will invest into the property to be able to make that happen. If they don't meet any of those triggers, they simply don't qualify for the rebates. So there's, in this case, 280,000 reasons for them to make sure they get the project done.
Is the way that this current agreement is written that the elevator would be built before they finish those? Because what I wouldn't want to happen is we front the 65G, we get the elevator in and then it goes away and it folds and nothing ever happens and now we've got, a bridge to nowhere. So will a potential approval of this be tied to hastening them completing the project or not necessarily?
This one will be treated as a separate project, but they will have to sign off on everything related to it. I mean, it will be between the city and Mojo Properties. It's just we'll recover the dollars instead of turning around and recovering the dollars and rebating them to the company. So all of those parameters on expected completion date, everything will be in that development agreement that comes back to the council.
The other comment I would add is I think this overall has been a good project because you look at the significant amount of investment that they have put into this building to transform it into urban living. Again, I am a big supporter of urban living. To me, that it's still attractive from the standpoint that it has underground parking, and right now there's not too many places uptown that have that available. So with that underground parking, they can drive in, stay dry, get in their car, have that. And I think the elevator will do what Randy's talking about, will enhance the sale of those units. So I think that's maybe the one missing piece. But they've got the parking, they've got the location, and I think that is maybe the last piece of the puzzle, hopefully, that will result in those selling and moving along and accomplishing what we all wanted to do a couple years ago.
Thank you. Any other questions from the council here for the city manager or Mr. Glue? Seeing none, I will move the meeting back over to the mayor. Thank you.
Number 2.
This is a resolution to set the date for a public hearing on the urban renewal plan for the Central Corridor urban renewal area. This is to add the library project as a standalone project into the urban renewal plan. This is the authorizing piece that allows the city to proceed forward with the bonding process.
Questions? Number 3.
For this one, I'm going to turn this one over to Attorney Bullerman, gladly.
So this is about cats and dogs. We have had both feral cats and our dog ordinance come up as a topic of conversation at council over the course of the last several months. And so rather than come to you guys with an amendment relating to dogs and then a few weeks later come with one relating to cats, I thought it would be wisest to just revamp the entire ordinance all at once. That being said, I did send over 2 memos along with this proposed amendment, and it kind of outlines what the changes are. The cat ones are pretty basic. There's some new definitions, and essentially what we've done with this at this point in time is allow for TNR programs to operate in the city, but without any sort of city funding. That's something that would require, that would have budgeting implications, so that's something that you guys would need to address as you go through the budgeting process. It's not something that we currently have a fund set aside for right now. As part of this process, I am taking a look at what our animal control contract with the city of Cedar Rapids has. We don't have an animal control unit, so if people are trapping cats, we don't have that ability to just go out and pick these cats up. So right now, that's something that would be on these volunteers' shoulders to do so. One thing that I forgot to mention, I think in the TNR memo, oh, nope, I did put it in here. I added a provision that it's not compliant if you are not participating in a TNR program or if you have not been trained as a community caregiver to harbor or feed feral, stray, free roaming, or at-large animals, unless it's for like a short-term situation where you've got somebody's dog, it's your neighbor's dog, and you're holding on to it until they can get there or whatever. But that's just a temporary type situation. One of the big problems we have that we've had a lot of complaints about is people's neighbors feeding large colonies of cats. And so we want to encourage people who really care about animals to actually go and get the training that's available to them through the Iowa Humane Alliance and the community cat programs, rather than just sending out a bowl of cat food that's there for any cat, any vermin, any raccoon, really anything that would be interested in eating that cat food could get to it then. It also would not provide the benefit that the TNR program is supposed to provide, which is making those cats in the community behave better and, and it's supposed to reduce like cat fighting, and obviously it should eventually reduce the number of cats, but as of right now, it's kind of hard to find the data that backs that up 100%. So I added it in, like I said, and it's kind of up to you guys what you want to do with that as far as if it's something you want to look into further for the city to be a part of. But right now, the option that people have is to essentially trap these cats, take them to the Iowa Humane Alliance, pay for them to be seen by a veterinarian, vaccinated, altered, and then returned to the community. And that's really the only option there right now. I did take a look at what Cedar Rapids' current policy is, and their animal control also does not even go and pick up trapped cats in the community. It is the responsibility of citizens there, if they want to participate in this, to transport those cats. I would have some concerns. I think we would need to talk to our insurance about liability if we were going to fund a TNR program, because now we are encouraging people to go and mess with feral animals. So that's something I would have some concerns about there. And I don't know that in any of our job descriptions it involves the handling of feral cats. So I also don't believe that we have right now the employee resources to be trapping and transporting animals. The other thing is that these changes don't address the issue of what do people do about those animals now that are getting into their garages, their sheds. We have had some very vocal citizens about that issue. The Iowa Humane Alliance is willing to come out and talk to them about humane ways to keep them out of their property, but ultimately, TNR, just because you have a cat altered and just because they don't have rabies doesn't mean they're going to stay out of your garage, essentially. But I do think that having a provision in here to prevent people from just leaving food out in the open would be helpful, but that would also provide some I guess not really provide, that would force those neighbors then to take responsibility. If your neighbor is feeding feral cats and you don't like it, you'll have to document that, provide us with that documentation so we can send out the order to abate. And now that that would be in the code, that would also be a municipal infraction, and they would be subject to a $750 fine for the first time, and for each additional day, $1,000. So it's a pretty steep thing to just leave out food. But even the TNR program, like that you find online, we didn't talk about it specifically with the two that came here, I don't recall, but when I was looking at it online, they don't encourage just leaving food out in the open either. They have like a controlled method that they do their community caregiving. So that's kind of the rundown on the cat side. On the dog side, this was kind of a collaborative project. The police department drafted it first, and they did a lot to make us kind of similar to what Cedar Rapids has. So I took a look at what the Cedar Rapids code is too, and which is a good idea because it keeps it kind of uniform in the communities. That way, you know, we don't have to worry about the dogs not knowing if they're in Marion or Cedar Rapids. I've yet to find one that could delineate that. But with this, I think there's some provisions in the Cedar Rapids code that, depending on the pending litigation in the state, are going to be problematic for them. So I kind of took some of those parts out. But we've added a modification to the at-large to allow for off-leash dog parks, because currently, even if you go to an off-leash dog park in Marion, you have to keep your dog on a leash. So that's really counterintuitive. And we also don't currently have an exception for any government agency animals. So we added those two exceptions. We've added a definition for dangerous animal so that we've got both a dangerous animal and a vicious animal. And we've put some discretion with the police department as to when they would impound an animal. And under state code, there are some times when that impoundment is required, but the pending litigation will make that also a little bit harder. Like the pending litigation, if it's passed, or not litigation, sorry, the pending legislation, if it's passed as currently drafted, will require a court order for the impoundment of any animal. So, yeah, under the vicious or dangerous dog statutes. And so the state code also allows for the health department to be the ones to impound the animal if it's required. So that kind of gives some discretion there. Also under dangerous animal, the second definition regarding known propensities, tendencies, or dispositions to attack unprovoked, that relates to specific animals, not to breeds. There's a lot of communities that are going away from the breed-specific statutes, and I think that's a good move for Marion not to go into that, because there are dogs of every breed which are going to have a propensity to bite. There are dogs of every breed which are going to be the nicest dog you've ever met. So I think if we start getting into the breed-specific, that's when you start running into issues as well with the statutes being overbroad and vague. There are a few exceptions there that allows for dogs essentially to engage in self-defense or defense of their owners, or if they are law enforcement animals. Our current at-large statute requires the owner to allow animals to run loose. I've modified that so that there's no longer the word allow in there. It's just that if your dog is at large, or your animal is at large, essentially, you are responsible and you are subject to the citation or to a municipal infraction. And again, it's then with the seizure of the dogs, that's at the officer's discretion. Let's see here. Rabies vaccination we've modified so that it's 4 months instead of 6 months. That matches the Cedar Rapids code. The state code is still 6 months. Owner's duty, we've added some additional requirements which are the same as the Cedar Rapids code, and those just relate to preventing animals running at large, transportation of animals in a safe manner, not putting, your pets in the back of your car in the winter unsafely, things like that, not leaving animals unattended in vehicles when it poses a risk to their life, safety, or health, and not abandoning your domestic animals. And then the first one, I was not here at the council meeting when this was discussed the first time, but I believe this came from council, a requirement for providing homeowners insurance if your pet attacks on your property. You are already required to report that to the health department by state code, but this would also require that insurance information to be provided. I do have a question there. Right now, it's just whenever that bite happens, but I'm not sure if this is a requirement we really want to require if this happens like off the owner's property. I'm not sure how far insurance is going to reach on that. And then we've increased the penalties to the scheduled fines and offenses and added a few additional scheduled violations there. It does match what Cedar Rapids has adopted for both the amounts and what those violations are. So wherever you're living in the metro area between Cedar Rapids and Marion, you should know what you're supposed to do with your dog. With regard to the pending legislation in the state as written, I think I've put in my memo how that would affect our code. It's been introduced and referred to their public safety committee. It could go nowhere. It could get passed. It could get revised. So I can kind of keep my eye on that, but I do think these are some changes that we do need to make. One thing that must have been talked about at the meeting that was added in involved vicious barking, and that would not really, number one, that would be problematic within the state code, and I think we would be getting into some ground where we would be looking at taking personal property if we were going to take someone's dog because it's barking and not really posing an actual threat to safety. Also, with the officers having that discretion, I would be concerned that we would have a pretty easy way to abuse that in the public, and with it being the officer's discretion, how often do we want to have a police officer called out because somebody's dog is barking? Dogs are going to bark. And what's aggressive, what's violence? And so, I mean, if they're properly restrained and they're properly on a leash as they're supposed to be, what I perceive to be vicious barking may not be the same as what the person next to me does. And so we run the risk of, number one, having our officers called out frequently for things where they're just going to say, okay, well, stop your dog from barking. And if they take the dog because of barking, we're going to have all of the animal groups in the state of Iowa down here objecting to this, and they have lots of volunteers, and they will not run out of resources to come down and talk to us if we start taking people's dogs because they're barking. Any questions?
Questions? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
I do have a question, and I was the one that was leading the question on the homeowners insurance. I have contacted legal departments with a couple different carriers in the following of the one bite rule here in the state of Iowa. And those attorneys did advise me that they would seek legal attention. And I also think it would also help prevent and eliminate a lot of the reoffending issues. We just had this recent situation where this dog attacked another dog, and then also attacked the human, and there was these were multiple reoffenses. Had that individual had the opportunity to do a third-party loss to that carrier, that insured would have been put on immediate notice, and then they would also be subjecting that carrier to what they call accepted liability. I think when the homeowners put in that position, they would rethink either the restraining of that animal, the positioning of that animal, and their position in the community with that. So I'm going to be a huge advocate that we do. We ask for financial responsibility at the time of loss in an automobile accident, and I think these things are getting to the issue too, where homeowners, so HO2s, 3s, 4s, and 6s should have that same luxury. If I was attacked or a family member attacked, we should have that luxury of notifying that carrier and putting them on notice that there has been an event and that situation occurred. I assure you that those offenses would not reoccur over and over and over, which is what's happening today. So, Paul, you want to chime in on that one? Because that is a huge issue. And when I talk to the legal departments representing insurance companies, that's a big topic, and they will go after those. So I would encourage us to seek and give those people that opportunity. When we're doing a report and it's been subject to putting it on record, I think we should have that third-party information. So, you know, if there's been an attack to their property as well as their human being those are the one bite rules in the state of Iowa. So
That's included, right?
Yes, that is currently included. I didn't know, my question was whether or not we want to require this only when the bite happens on the owner's property, or if you want to include it anywhere.
in my opinion, it would be anywhere. It's not subject to boundaries. Just my opinion.
I would support that.
Paul?
I agree with him 100%.
Okay.
I think there are a few things companies all agree on. There are some things they don't, but I think here I think you're right on.
I mean, the majority of the time, the cases we're talking about, it'll happen off the owner's property. I mean, the cases that Randy is referring to, that the police department had to respond to, I'm aware of that as well. I know some of the people, but again, all of those were off of the owner's property, maybe adjoining, maybe close to, but none of them were on the owner's property. So, but
Anyone feel differently about that? Okay, so I think, okay. Other questions or other comments on this?
a couple small questions. First of all, Kara, thank you for all the effort you put into this. I mean, I know it's taken a lot of time, effort, research, investigation. So I know we talked about this a number of months ago, so thank you. We've come a long ways, which I think will help clarify a number of the situations in the future. But I got two areas to bring up. One is the barking thing. So obviously, there's always going to be calls in the future about barking. So what is the response? I mean, a lot of times they're calling your department, chief. So what's our position on loud, continuing barking then?
That's actually in there. It's just not in there under vicious or dangerous.
Okay.
So it's still, I believe it's even a scheduled violation if your dog is barking
Okay, all right,
continuously.
all right.
We actually also have that in our noise ordinance. So that's actually one of the
Thought it
things
might
I
be noise.
noted was that we need to kind of maybe sort out where we want to keep that. And
Okay.
I think it's probably easier to measure here than under the noise ordinance,
All
because it's just continuous and it doesn't have to be at a measurable level. So I think it's probably better suited here. It's also a higher fee in this code section. So
Okay, gotcha.
in the city's interest, I would recommend that we enforce it under this code.
And then on section 55.14, where it talks about animals in parks and on golf courses, as it says, no animal shall be allowed within 100 feet of any pool, pavilion, playground, etc. How much do we enforce that? I'm pretty sure I see dogs in parks on leash, off leash, all the time. So,
And the trails.
well, yeah, we got the whole trail situation as well, but that would probably come under the definition of public right-of-way or public, or in a public trail. That's actually okay under this. So how do we enforce that whole aspect? Or do we?
We're kind of
don't, let's
limited
take it
on
out.
what we can do on the trails, because people, generally, they wait until they get away from the playground areas, and then they take the dog off when they're walking. And we'll
Right.
get calls. There's one individual that rides a bike that calls occasionally
Yeah.
about a dog that he'll see kind of out in the Netherlands. We've got a bike patrol. Generally, it's our SROs that do that in the summertime.
Okay.
That would be the occasion for that. I think the playground instances, they don't want people up around the playgrounds where kids are with a dog running off the leash.
Exactly.
That we can enforce. One of the other things that's going to be maybe a little difficult is the feeding of the feral cats. Is if somebody puts a food bowl out in their yard and they claim, hey, it's for my own cats, but I can't stop these other ones. You know, we're kind of limited in what we can do with that, but we can only do what we can do.
They could put a sign, no feral cats allowed.
Yeah. I actually addressed that.
Yeah.
They are not, it says this includes leaving food out for animals not at large if the food can be accessed by feral, stray, free roaming, or at-large animals. So if you have a cat that is out in your backyard, feed them when they come in, or feed them when you're standing there, but don't leave it out. And maybe that's harsh. I am not an outside pet owner. I have an inside pet. We feed her inside. So I may be missing something vital there, and you guys can always direct me to edit that out. But that actually, quite frankly, if people are leaving pet food out, would be a violation already of the nuisance code, where we don't want people leaving out or creating situations which would promote vermin or other pests. And so leaving human or pet food out is really not within the code if you're going to do it to the extent that you're inviting in pest animals or things like that.
Yes.
Yeah, I too want to thank Kara for all the work on here, because this has been in process for quite a while. In looking back at the monthly reports, under the section animal and calls for service, it appears to be about 65 or 70. So I'm just looking at 1 month, but it's certainly on the higher end. It's in the top 10 things that our department responds to. So I do feel like we need to tighten this up. I received a call today from a citizen regarding feral cats and the issue that she and her neighbors are having, and my understanding is that correspondence has been given and it'll be coming again since we haven't yet received it. But you mentioned something, Kara, about the first offense, if proven, for like encouraging feral cats feeding, being $750. Is that right?
That's what that's the municipal infraction rate.
So I'm not against that. I am as a first, Mark, because some people just might be ignorant to the problem that they're really creating. And then in other situations where, and I think most, it's going to be Hatfields and McCoys that, we're dealing with neighbor issues. But I would like to, if it's appropriate in an ordinance, to put the kinds of proof that can be given to a police officer if they come, whether it's photographic evidence or something, to give citizens tools to try to, if my neighbor, this call I got today, that feral cats are ruining the outdoor furniture because they're in it and they're going to the bathroom on it, they're menacing. I have 2 indoor dogs. They go outside, but I have 2 dogs that are indoors, and if you have another animal on the other side of the glass all day, your life is not great. There's just, there are a lot of, this is a very personal thing to me, and I would like to put some teeth into the punishment on the people who are encouraging this, because eventually, if it gets out of control, we are going to have to budget more money or money where we're not budgeting it now. So I'd like to let the citizens try to help enforce this to the degree that we can. So I don't know what can be done, but I do think $750 is stiff if it's your first offense.
Too stiff.
But yeah, it is. But if you've been given a warning and your first, if your first is a warning and you were put on alert, then ding them for whatever. I don't even care the second time, because shame on you, right? But I would like to mold that and deter that, and then again tell people who want to help keep this under control what would be acceptable as evidence, so to speak, so that they can help officers who are coming, and it's not just a he said, she said.
So I can actually help you with that right now. Because this would be a municipal infraction, it does not require police time. The citizen can call into the city and say, my neighbor is feeding these pets. And then we say, okay, here's kind of the documentation we need from you, and you have to be willing to come to court to testify about your documentation. We send out an order to abate, which gives them so much time to stop doing this. We say, hey, we have a report and some evidence that you're doing this, knock it off. You have so many days to comply, and if you do it again after that time frame, we will file the municipal infraction. I will not file that, and Ryan will not file that without the appropriate proof. So when people come and talk to me originally, or if they talk to Matt, because this would be a nuisance then, he will kill me for adding to his duties, I'm sure. But I would make sure we have a list. If somebody calls in, this is essentially what you need. Like, I spoke to somebody today and said, if you want us to pursue this, I'm going to need photos, preferably date stamped, and I'm going to need you to keep a record of what days you've seen the food out there or what you're seeing, and then you have to be willing to come to court and testify.
How will they know this number? Because my assumption is they're calling you, right? So do you then defer to them? Like, what number are you talking about that they call Kara?
They would call the city. If they called the main number, I think they would probably get them to the right place, but I assume that would be building inspections.
So, so I would like to just make a few comments about this. I know it sounds easy, municipal infraction. It takes mountains of time. So I just want the council to understand that, I mean, providing the information is one thing. I think you guys have all received notice on one particular incident that's been going on for a long time. I don't know how many times staff has to go out, take photos, have the conversation, meet with the folks, and then even if a municipal infraction is filed and Kara has to do the filing, there's a date set, there's mediation is generally required.
Absolutely required.
So now you got staff going to court, and so it takes a long, and if you look at it's the same process we apply for nuisance abatement orders. So you get the monthly report, and how many of those addresses have been the same address for so long, and that's the difficulty. And so if you think about right now, we have one nuisance abatement officer. So I'm not saying that it's something that we should not do anything about, but when we say, that we just file a municipal infraction, that is not just like writing a ticket. I mean, it is a process.
Can we write a ticket? Because
I
don't
could.
disagree with you, but that's not a reason to not do something,
No,
right?
I don't.
So we have to figure out the most efficient way to address the community need. Because you're right. I look at those reports where I'm like, this house for 3 years, really? I get it.
My hope is that, like you said, we send people that order to abate, which has all the do this or else language in it, and they see that potential for a $750 fine, and they're going to stop putting their Meow Mix outside. That's my hope. It may not work out that way, and going to court on these is not probably a really great plan, but right now that's what I've got. Because if we put this on the criminal side and we have officers going out, it's even harder for them because their standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. Ours is preponderance of the evidence. So I only have to have people come in and show 51% this person did this.
So what's the number that is called? Where do we tell somebody? Or if they call City Hall and they say, I have a feral cat issue, to whom do they get transferred?
Nuisance abatement officer, Matt Newhouse. So, and my point wasn't that we shouldn't do anything. My point is just that I wanted to make sure that everybody understands that municipal fraction process is onerous and not easy, and when we only have one person right now handling it with legal, so legal time and one other staff person. So.
And what generally happens on those is that people do get that order to abate, and they do one of two things. They do absolutely nothing because they don't think we're going to go forward with it, or they work really hard to comply pretty quickly. Okay. Because a lot of times they don't know what they're doing. I mean, I assume these people know that feeding cats outside is going to annoy their neighbors, but they may not realize that it's also not in our code to do so.
Okay. Good discussion. Other questions? Else? Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions on number 5 under administrative services? Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I skipped number 4. On the number 4.
Yeah, the City Council, we received requests from the Water Board via the Water Department's General Manager for the Council to consider partial reimbursement for the capital contribution that the Water Department made to City Hall. As the Council knows, they've announced that they are intending to renovate an existing building that they own over on 5th Avenue and move out to that facility. So their plan is around the middle of next year to move out of there and out of City Hall, which allows us to recapture some of that space. We had been looking at options for City Hall, knowing that we were getting crowded in here and trying to figure out when do we hit the point where we do have to start contemplating a third floor. And that, I think, kind of prompted the water department to take a harder look at what their options were. And so they came up with a viable plan. Todd presented a memo to the council that outlined what he was coming up with for financial calculations. Just wanted to see if the council had any other questions or concerns. I know from my standpoint, I did go back and do some additional research. When I started with the city, Todd's predecessor had mentioned that the amount was based off of the equivalent of a 30-year, what a 30-year lease would have been. There's nothing there that we could find where there was a written agreement between the city and the water department that had a term in it, had those financial numbers in it. There were minutes from their approval of the financial contribution, and then, of course, we cashed the check. But that's about all we could really find related to that.
Okay. Any questions? Questions for Todd while he's here? Yes, go ahead.
So I just, when I was working through this and trying to figure out what this would mean, and it was interesting that Medco is paying rent. And so then I thought, well, it's sort of like they're paying rent, but they're not really paying rent because they had an initial investment of about $320,000, if my numbers are right. So then I was trying to figure out, well, how much rent would they pay and square footage, and so that's sort of the way I was looking at it. And so I asked Lon if he could pull some information, not knowing if there was this lease agreement, right, for the 30 years. And based on my calculations, it's maybe close to $2,000 a month in rent that they were paying over the last, is it 13 years? Am I right? And the square footage, is it similar to what Medco's space is? Is that accurate?
It's pretty close, yeah.
Okay. So those were the things I was thinking about as I was reviewing the proposal. I'd be interested to see what others were thinking.
Just Medco space or Medco chamber combined?
Medco chamber, sorry, right?
Yeah.
All of their space combined. Good question.
Yeah, I believe I did pull that lease out, and I think when the lease was originally written, they were still one organization. The split happened later because there was actually a lease amendment done to allow for the chamber to be able to do a sublease, because at that point Medco had moved out to being its own organization. So the lease numbers, the square footage and everything didn't change, but they had to reflect the new normal for the organization.
Yeah, the way I looked at it was kind of that the water department bought a condo share in Marion City Hall, and if 13 years later, 14 years later, by the time they moved out, there's still some value in that condo ownership. And if you take a 30-year life of a building, which is probably on the short side, that talking about reimbursing about $150,000 of that, or 50% of that, to me on a depreciable basis with a 30-year life seemed reasonable to me. So I didn't look at it from a rental basis. I was looking at it more from, I didn't care about your 3% return investment out. That was out the window. That didn't make any sense to me at all. But from the standpoint of, hey, I bought a share of this building, and I'm going to move out. Now I want a return of some of that money back, and on a depreciable basis, half of it after 13 years is reasonable.
And to finish out what Councilwoman Atkins' line of thought, the current lease, the Chamber and Medco combined pay $2,309.45 per month.
And the square footage between the two, what is the difference?
They're about 100 square feet apart. The chamber, they have a little bit more space, and then they also have some space, dedicated storage down in the basement where the water department shares the same storage that we use.
Yes, Ms. Gadela.
Yeah, so I was thinking about it like a condo as well, with a similar logic. My question is, where will we take this $150 from to reimburse if that's voted on?
They had offered to allow it to happen over a period of time, and if we're elect to use the option to do it over a period of time, we'd look to do it out of operating funds, out of the general fund to reimburse. If we're going to do it all at once, then it crosses the threshold into being a capital project.
What kind of timeline if it was divided up?
I think they're open on that. The water board had to propose 10 years at $15,000 per year.
Oh, okay.
Non-interest, no interest?
They said $15,000 per year, so I took it as
You want that
was the
3%,
amount.
right?
Thank you.
Good evening. Appreciate you considering this option. The sooner the better, but we know money is tight, especially in the upcoming budget season coming up. So, and if we can get it paid out in 5 years, great. If it's going to take 10 years, that's stretching it, but, we'll work with you guys on that.
Okay. Questions for Todd while he's here?
Can you help me get out of my timeshare?
Question,
Yes.
what is your projected date on when your building on Fifth Avenue
Will be completed.
ready?
In a perfect world, July 1.
Okay.
But it's going to depend on Mother Nature and the weather. We got to build a parking lot and
Okay, midsummer
how
then.
bad our winter is with water main breaks and everything. We're doing the majority of the work ourselves.
Okay, all right.
Okay, other questions? Thank you. Other questions for city manager on this issue? Okay, now we'll move on to number 5, if there's any questions on that. Otherwise, we'll go to public service. Mr. Miller?
Excuse me.
Your Honor, City Council, item number 1, that's a resolution approving the purchase of replacement parts. This is our horizontal grinder. This is the piece of equipment that takes all of the yard waste that we receive at public service, both curbside collections and the citizen drop-off area. We utilize this piece of equipment to process the yard waste. This is something we really can't do without. About a month ago, we sheared the in-feed conveyor. It's a pretty expensive repair. Originally, we had this scheduled for replacement about 2 years from now. What we're proposing to do is go ahead and repair the unit and push the replacement off an additional 2 years. So 4 years from now, we'll look at replacing this piece of equipment. We're looking to take the repair dollars out of the solid waste replacement fees, which is sitting just fine. We have contingencies for things like this, but this piece of equipment here, a new one, is about $500,000 to $800,000 new. So we're recommending, let's go ahead and get it fixed, push it off about 4 years, and get some more life out of it. Any questions?
Good thought.
Yeah.
Any questions for Mr. Miller? Okay, next.
Thank you. And then items 2 and 3, these are approving the project calendars for soliciting bids for both the mechanical systems and fire suppression system for the public service maintenance facility. The mechanical systems package, that's probably going to be the largest package that will be going out for bid for. That's scheduled just under $1.9 million. We're looking to get bids back and bring them back to council at the end of January. Work would start March 2020. Liquidated damages are programmed at $300 per day, and we're given about a year to complete it. It's a very extensive mechanical systems package. This hooks up to our geothermal system that's been installed, and so it's a very complex package, so that's why we give them that long of a time frame. The fire suppression package, that's scheduled to occur at the same time. That's scheduled at $360,000 for the project. Again, we'll bring these back to council at the same time for approval and for review. Again, that's scheduled to be finished up in December of 2020. So, any questions?
Questions on that one? Nope. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
There's one more item, number 4, if anyone has a question about that. None. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, sir.
Parks. Mr. Carolyn?
This item was, the park naming was an item that was on the November agenda, and we pulled that from the agenda. While I was kind of prepping for that, I found a document in the file for this park that was basically from the developers that had donated this just under 10 acres to the city for a future park. Eldon McMillan and Kurt Cope were the developers that donated the park. They had a request in that memo to take into consideration the naming of the park Prairie Hill Park. So we did take a look at that, had the park board review that last week. And so what would be on the council agenda would be a motion to concur with that park board recommendation to honor that request of the developers to name that park Prairie Hill Park. One thing with the updated naming policy that the city adopted a few years ago, one thing within that, and kind of why I have the agenda item as a motion to concur, within that policy, it talks about a 30-day period that we basically push out public notice that's the potential name of that park. And then basically after we go through that period, it would come back to the city council as a resolution. There's a public hearing associated with that based on the updated naming policy. So I just wanted to bring that forward. That's kind of the sequence that we would have with this.
Okay. I think that's a good name.
Yep.
Can you talk for just a couple minutes about what's going to happen at this park, or when is it going to be developed?
Yeah, this is and this is real preliminary. This is, we're just right now, we're working to some extent on the master plan for this park with Snyder and Associates. So we're going to keep this pretty generic right now. Again, this 50th Street, 29th Avenue, and Greenway over here. So we want to keep it somewhat plain right now because we're going to do a public outreach. We're going to do a public outreach session as part of these master plans that we're doing for not only this park but Gill Park, so we can get that feedback from the community, what they want to see in a park. So to that question, though, there will be green place areas, some passive areas, playground proposed in that, and then what other elements that we can bring in that after we get that feedback from the community. So we don't want to, we just want to have somewhat of a clean slate for the public right now, just kind of a little bit of a concept.
What kind of timeline for completion?
Overall completion and build out of the park, we've got a couple funding cycles right now. We have one of $100,000 in there. We have another allotment that will be coming for the entire build out. So it'll probably be phased a little bit in doing that. Probably all full build out of that park based on what we end up with that final plan. I'm going to say you're probably going to be from today. You're probably in a 3-year window probably to get there.
Great. Questions? Yes, Ms. McHale.
Of this line in your report, I have it underlined. I keep turning my microphone off. And it says, in 2010, developers Eldon McMillan and Kurt Cope donated 9.6 acres of property for a future city park. And so my question is, what did we do? Like, how do we encourage developers to donate land when they're developing a big swath for more green space in that? Do we do something? What can we do again? What can we replicate? Because we're having a lot of big developments go in and nobody's given us anything but a retention basin. So.
And the majority, just on that topic, again, the majority of where this park lies in a floodplain. Mm-hmm. So again, it's somewhat undevelopable ground.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of the trade-off sometimes where park ground ends up being, the donations come from that ground that isn't somewhat marketable, if you will. So I can't.
Darn it!
Today I
can't
necessarily
answer
the question. That's where I was heading to encourage them to donate. I think the way to do that is to almost put that, to your point, Mayor, that we have it, that it's part of development, that in some vehicle way that we may have that mechanism that the land needs to be donated.
Or requires some
It's
green
a requirement.
Space.
Is really the way to do it.
A percentage that we can buy land with in the future.
Great. Okay. Darn it, I thought there was an easy answer.
Okay, other questions on this particular item of naming the park? Thank you. Engineering.
So previously, the city council has approved the CMPO application. After that approval occurred, there were some projects that were overestimated and finalized out, and so additional money became available through the CMPO. So all we're doing is updating our application to increase it another $372,000.
Okay.
Not bad, just neat.
Any questions on that?
Oh, good deal.
Okay, next.
The next one is accepting the subdivision, which is Hunters Ridge North First Edition. So this would be north of the Hunters Ridge Golf Course that connects Lucor to Winslow. And so this is actually accepting the streets and all the improvements that have been made as part of the subdivision.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Gadela.
Isn't this the subdivision that we have the first private roundabout?
Correct.
How's that going?
Good as far as I know.
Yeah, okay. Good.
Not much traffic there yet.
Yeah, it's true.
Not much traffic.
Okay, other questions on that one? Number 3?
Number 3 is the acceptance of Gemstone Estates 5th Edition. So this would be between Old Indian Creek Road, Tower Terrace, and Lucor. The next section of that, accepting all the public improvements.
Questions? Okay. I do have one question for Mr. Carolyn. So when I'm out and I'm talking about parks and trails and I say we have more than 600 acres of parks and trails, does that include Prairie Hill Park, or is that now 610?
Actually, that 600 acres, when we talk about that 600-acre total, that includes those parks that will be coming online.
Okay, so that's all included.
But it includes all the green spaces that we have across the city, too, that, if you will, that green play, that allows for that green play, whether it be soccer or whatever, all those areas encompass that 600 in the woodland areas that we have. Falkswood, for instance, all those are grouped into that total overall.
Okay. Good. All right. On the community development, we have one item that's marked.
Yes, the one item's marked, and then the 2 items below it are all referenced in the same presentation. As the council probably recalls, we did some work out in Collins Road Square property last fall, about the same time actually, last winter, in which they came in and requested a public access easement through their property. And at the last minute, we kind of looked at that and decided it wasn't going to be the best interest of the city. And so we've been looking at the property again. And so there's a couple things going on out there, and I'd just like to walk you through. I think everybody knows that this is Michael's, Twickstown Road, and then Collins is down here. As you come into that parking lot, you can see the old, where Twickstown Road used to pop down, and there used to be the frontage road. That has changed with the Collins Road improvements, and now the intersection just drops straight into Collins Square. If you've been out there, it's like the Wild West where this black line is. I mean, it's not
Going right through
great.
the parking lot now.
Well, and actually there was a major accident out there, I think last week or something. It was a head-on collision. So there's been, the actual owner of the property's contacted me, and they're kind of stuck trying to figure out what to do because they have leases that are tied to the way the parking lot was configured, and they can't change a lot without messing with their leases, and so there's some internal issues going on. I don't know that there's anything that we can do with regard to that. I know there's been speed bumps put up and signage and different things. But the way that the public access easement to the property currently exists, it's this highlighted area that kind of runs north in front of Michael's and then across this parking. So it really goes through the park. Oh, no, I'm just trying to illustrate it. Well, I can draw on it. I really didn't want it, but right here is where it exists. There you go. Now you can see it. And it goes right through the parking spaces. In the wintertime, they plow the snow to the center, and they pile the snow in that area. So really, there's the access that's being provided for public access easement really isn't accessible by the public. So there's a longer backstory on this, on how this came to be, but I don't know that it's relevant based on all that's happened. All I can say is that this is the existing, and we're trying to move that. So we've been working with the owners, and what they're proposing to do is really just put the easement where the black line is, so it's kind of how you go out there. That would be the public access easement. It would be open and maintained over a period of time. I think if public services, fire, police are going to go through that parking lot, they're not going to go up in front of Michael's or the stop sign and then cut through. They're going to go through this area. So that's what they're trying to accomplish. Additionally, when the Collins Road project was developed, they had to acquire some property, and because Cedar Rapids and the City of Marion had a 2080 agreement, the City of Cedar Rapids acquired the property, and it's just a small sliver, as you can see by the deed here, and it's located like right in here. Oh, you can't see that either. Right in here. And so it's not very big, but when you're accepting a deed, I thought you'd want to see what it actually was. And then here's the realignment or the easement plat through there. It's not the prettiest situation. It's not ideal, but I think this just kind of cleans it up. The property owner is really wanting to get it kind of taken care of because they have some issues with how it is addressed through their property currently.
How are they going to direct the public to use that? I mean, as far as people know, they don't know that that's where the easement is.
Well, currently, if you look, I don't know if I'll be able to do this or not. No, I won't. The public goes this way. Mm-hmm. It's just that there's no cars parked in the parking stalls in this area, except on 2 days of the year, the day after Thanksgiving and the day after Christmas. And so what happens is cars just go screaming across that area. I don't know that we're in a position to require them to delineate that any further than what is required, but this is how the traffic goes through that parking lot currently. They did put up a bollard with a sign right here. I don't know if you've seen it lately, but it's laying at about a 45-degree angle right now, so someone's hit that. The stop sign at the entrance is about, I think it's probably 50% larger than, it's like the stop sign in the Linmar parking lot. It's giant. I don't know if it meets MUCT, whatever, but nonetheless, they're really trying to do some things there, and this is just cleaning it up. So by this action, we'd be rescinding a resolution and then reestablishing it as identified.
Are they willing to put any markings on that new easement?
But I think
on the parking lot itself?
They want to restripe the parking lot consistent with this because you can't see it very well at this point.
Yeah.
They did some parking lot improvements in the fall, and I think they were going to wait till spring to do the restriping.
Yeah, so they can do what they want. It's all private, so they can treat it just like a road with stripe it on the outside and then center dotted line. If they want to do that, just to show it start from one end to the other. People are doing it now.
Yeah.
But they may use it more if it's marked off like that.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
Tom, on that, on that easement, then do we take liability? I hate to keep referencing the insurance, but in this case here, when two cars are on private property, that becomes a civil matter between the two owners and the police. There's no jurisdiction there. If we put that through there, now that changes the language. If that accident does take place there, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but if that is an easement and we mark it off, then now that becomes a city liability.
Yeah.
So if accidents occur there, that becomes, we now That's our jurisdiction. Correct. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Chief.
Yep, nope, you're right.
Okay, thank you. That control out there would be a nightmare. I see, I at some point would see the owners of the mall trying to barricade that off with road construction, concrete barriers and stuff. I hope we're looking at this through a lot of lenses, because right now it's, like you said, it's a Wild West show, but if two cars have an accident, that's private matter. But when we take that to an easement, that becomes our jurisdiction. So that's signage and everything else that goes along with that. So I'm not quite sure where that falls, but I'm just curious.
We can look into that.
Just for clarification, we already have an easement on the other?
Correct.
There's a public easement on the
Yeah, it goes through.
other route.
Yeah.
Is that
Changing the easement?
This is
Shifting it down.
realigning it or shifting it.
So we already have it.
Where the red is, from the black.
Right.
Okay, so is it a possibility that we would just get rid of the easement and not accept the new one?
I like that. Yeah.
That's a very good point.
I don't know. I would question whether we would, I mean, in that instance, we would lose accessibility through the property from a public perspective. So police, fire, for jurisdictional purposes to get between Twickstown Road and
Could block it off.
Lindale, they could just say, that's fine, we'll restripe the lot and not have public access through there.
Right, I mean, you'd have to get to Lindale Drive in a different way.
Correct. Yep.
I mean, is there an obligation to provide access to Lindale Drive through this private property? I mean, was there a public policy reason?
I think the public access to the property is primarily for us to get through the property, not, I don't, from.
For
from
city, for
perspective.
emergency vehicles?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, I mean, it's
we
good
want
to have
access
this,
through
bring
the
all this
property.
out so we can consider everything, yeah.
No, sure.
Yeah, but if any time in the future, I understand if there's already an easement through there, where they're coming through and entering off of there, I don't think any time in the future that the mall is going to block that road off, because you got businesses right there. So, I mean, from the standpoint, I don't think I would never be concerned about them blocking it off. So it's still going to have, there's always going to be access from it,
So,
whether we have an easement or not.
so if someone came in and wanted to build a building right here, and we don't have a public access easement, then our access to the property would have to be some other way. So it's whether we want that. I mean, I can go back to staff and see if that's internally something we need, but, I mean, we lost the frontage road is the big deal.
Right.
And so the way that easement was provided for was it was condemned. So the Cedar Rapids, when they bought that piece of property and eliminated the frontage road, they condemned for an access easement through the property.
So what is the liability, though, potential liability of the city that's any different than a public street, 6th Avenue?
I would have to see.
I mean,
Yeah, I can take a look
How's
at
it
that a little
different?
bit more, but I mean, we have public access easements all over the place.
Yeah.
That it's not the same liability that we have on streets. Like,
It's not.
I mean, we have a public access, our Uptown Artway is a public access easement, and we have liability for damages that are caused there, but that's to those buildings, and it is limited. So if there's a car accident in that parking lot, I don't know that we would have any additional damage there, even the same that we would have on like our public right-of-way. I don't think we have any responsibility to provide traffic signaling or anything like that. It's an access easement, not a right-of-way. So it's not subject to
Okay.
the same like regulations that we have on our public streets. Not that we wouldn't have any liability, but it's not to the same level as a right-of-way.
And I have had occasion to look into some of this in the past related to, I think, is it Oak that goes over to Menards? There's a private street down there with a public access easement that overlays it. But for example, the private owner has to grant permission to the city to be able to even do things like enforce speeding down there, because it is still private property and we can't enforce speeding on private property. So in that case, I was able to look back and found a resolution where the city said, yes, we will do that on your behalf, property owner. Because a lot of those condominium associations, they may have private streets, but they have public access easement to allow us to get back in there with public service vehicles, et cetera.
I can take a look at that before Thursday and get a memo out on that.
I think it's important for us to have all that information so that we can make a good decision. So.
And I think one thing Tom didn't mention is not even just building a building there, but if we don't have a public access easement through there, like where there is right now, even if they didn't build a building, they could change the layout of the parking so that Deb wouldn't be able to get her big trucks through there. So as long as cars can get through there, they may not care whether or not a fire truck can get through there. And I don't know how that would affect her response time, because I'm sure there's places that I could get a little car through that you can't get your trucks through.
Well, actually, by the fire code, they have to maintain access for us.
To their building?
No, to the parking too, and an access road.
Through the entire parking?
Yes. That's through the fire
We're covered
code.
there. I think Mayor Pro Tem still had another question.
We've just hit those topics. Because we all know that there's a 30-foot high snow pile that gets built up there by the end of January. And when that is no longer accessible and the traffic's going through there, I'm just, from a logistics standpoint, if I'm the owner and you're gonna wear and tear on my parking lot, that's gonna last about this long before, Ryan, I'm sure you're running a snowplow down through there and clearing it out. So it's not on our maintenance, but yet I just see a big gray area here, but I know we're working through those things, but
Yeah, we have public access easements through almost every private development in town that has a large parcel.
But we don't plow that.
No, but I understand what you're saying. It's just another consideration as you look at those. So certainly, we'll do a little digging before Thursday if that makes sense.
They would have to move their giant snow pile this year, because right now that's where the public access easement is. That's where the proposed public access easement is right now. The easement doesn't run through there, so right now they can put it there, but they'll have to find a new snow hill.
Okay. So I think the distinction is between public right-of-way and public access easement, and there is a difference. And I think that's what we're trying to get to, is what is the difference and what's our liability. Okay. Thank you. Good discussion. Does that take care of everything under community development, Mr. Treharn? Is that everything there?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, on to library. Who's leading this? Mr. Neri.
Good evening. So we have our resolution bringing forward tonight to approve the contract with our construction manager, Bush Construction. I would like to introduce you guys to Jared Engler. He's the vice president from Bush that is here with us tonight, who can help answer any questions. In the memo, I just gave a little bit of an explanation that we've gone through a selection process. That selection process included our library building steering committee, the city staff of many departments helped weigh in on that decision, as well as the library board making the final decision of choosing Bush Construction for our construction manager. We have put an estimate of cost in here, but the contract is 3.5% of the overall construction cost, which is standard process that is accrued and assessed, and this is in alignment with our architect's budget that we got from our original budget estimate for the project. The numbers are estimated right now, and just so you all know, the timing of this ask is crucial to our next steps moving forward, because we're moving into our estimating phase. As I've talked about in a couple of previous discussions with the council, we are right now trying to test our budget to make sure that what we're asking for and what we would like to see in the library is going to be feasible with our $18 million budget. So having this information, or being able to move forward with the estimating phase of the project, is really important at this juncture. And so I'll open that up for questions. I will let you all know that I will not be here on Thursday night. I'm turning this over to Kelly for the discussion on Thursday night. Certainly Lon has been involved with this process as well and knows a lot about what we're doing. But if there are any questions that you all have that I could help prepare for Thursday night and get Kelly and the team ready, I would appreciate that.
Questions?
Not many.
Okay.
Wow,
Are you
that was
handling the
easy.
next one?
It'll be easy Thursday.
I'm sorry?
I say it'll be pretty easy for her on Thursday.
Awesome. We hope so. Thank you so much.
You have one more item, no? Or somebody else? Okay.
So I know that we have, I'll let you do it because you can do it. The good news is that we get the opportunity to preview the agenda before tonight, and so we knew we would have a lot of things to discuss, so I tried to keep this brief and put it together rather quickly as I've been working on my budget presentation as well. I sent you all out a memo after the board meeting last week to let you know about the Library Board of Trustees' decision to join the other two Metro Library Network libraries. And let me also mention the Ely Public Library and the Fairfax Public Library are also fine-free libraries in Linn County also, so we're not alone here. I want to just give you a brief run-through and give you all an opportunity to answer questions in addition to the talking points that I gave to you all. So why go fine-free? First bullet that I have here is that fines do not work. There is a lot of research that has gone into this, and human behavior is kind of interesting. The example that I like to use is a little bit outside of the library industry, but gives you a good indication maybe that several of you will be able to relate to. There was a really interesting study done on parents picking their children up from daycare. So if you're told to pick your children up at 5 o'clock, you pick your children up at 5 o'clock. If you're told that you could pick your child up an hour late and pay $25, people will pay $25 and pick their children up an hour late. Time after time after time. When you are given the option to pay a fee, generally speaking, human behavior and all of the research that exists shows that people will pay the fee. So really, I like to talk about that particular research example because I think we can all relate to that a little bit. Additionally, overdue fines are not aligned with the mission of a modern public library in which we focus on equity and access. I'm going to go back to a similar example as we've talked about in that previous bullet. If we're reading a book and we're really excited about the book and it's time to turn it in and we are not done and we want to keep it 3 more days and we know we can pay 75 cents and keep the item for another week, most of us would pay the 75 cents and keep the item over a week. And so again, given the opportunity to keep the material longer, you would pay the 75 cents and it would be great. There's a whole nother demographic in our community that if they owe 1 quarter, they will never come back to the library again because they don't have the financial means to pay the quarter, and knowing that they owe money is another addition to their life, and it creates a barrier for them coming into the library. We did a pretty extensive, I think I shared with you guys the white paper that Cedar Rapids completed on this, and there are multiple studies across the United States. Chicago Public Library is the largest public library in the United States that has recently gone fine-free due to the equity issue. Fines and the accrual of fines are disproportionately affect our marginal and lower income families more than they do folks that can actually pay the fines. So it is an equity issue, and as we've had this conversation over time and talking about our Civil Rights Commission. There have been many civil rights cases that have happened regarding library fines, and so this is just becoming more and more a topic. And then, just kind of generally, this was one of the things that I spoke about when I talked to the Gazette about overdue fines, is that there's zero ROI on collecting fines because of the staff time, the materials, the resources it takes for us to go out and try to collect those fines. We actually end up upside down in how we the amount of time and effort that we put into those. Oh, wow, that's little. I apologize. What this is to tell you a little bit about is our stats. So generally speaking, we tend to, and when we think about punitive fines and fees or damages, we really forget about the fact that we have these in place that only affect a very small percentage of our population. In Marion, we have the highest on-time return rate of any of the libraries in the Metro Library Network. 90.5% of our materials are returned on time. People get it. They get their materials back to us. We have a very high return rate. So add to that those that get them in less than 1 week overdue are at 97%. If you start to add those things together, we have a very small percentage of our population that's actually moving into that assumed lost or having to pay the actual cost of the material. So again, we have this rule in place where it's that 20% rule, right? But even for us, it's much smaller than that. Having said that, though, if you look at the number of patrons that are blocked in Marion right now, in total we have 8,212 library patrons that are not allowed to have access to library because they owe a fine. And when we talk about fines, somebody could have a fine even though they brought a book back. So maybe you had 4 books out, you kept them for 2 weeks overdue, and you returned all of those books. Those fines still stay on your account. So the idea with fines is that we're trying to get our materials back. The whole thought process was that this was going to encourage folks to bring materials back. But even after they bring the materials back, those fines still stay on their account. So we're here at about 8,000 folks. Close to 2,000 of those are children that no longer have access to the library. In order to be blocked, you have to hit a $20 max. So at $20, you are blocked from library access. You can still have access to the computers, you can still come into the building, but you cannot take any material outside of the building. So what will the new process be? We have had a lot of people say, oh, well, we're just giving books away now. That's not the case. We still are going to be attempting to recover our materials. On day 1, the item is checked out. 2 days before the due date, this happens now. If you guys check out books anybody checks out books from the library, you get a notice 2 days prior to your due date to remind you that your due date is coming up. 1 day after the overdue, the due date, it becomes overdue. You will not assess fines, but it will become overdue the day that it is overdue. 3 days after the overdue, you will get an overdue reminder. Just so you know, we do this all electronically or by text message now. We do not typically send out paper notices unless we absolutely have to. 10-day overdue, they get a second reminder that says, hey, your book's now 10 days overdue. At 20 days, they do get a paper notice that says you now are at risk of having to pay for this item. If you do not return the item, you will be billed for the item. And that 30 days overdue, they are billed for the cost of the item. A few years back, there was a change at the credit bureau about what could be reported to your credit or not reported to your credit. Library fines were eliminated from that. So back in the day, libraries were able to go after patrons for excessive library fines, and that would affect your credit. That no longer happens. However, we can bill for lost items. And those lost items still go towards someone's credit history. We do not send anyone to the credit bureau or to the collection agency until they hit $50 in an amount owed to the library. Question about this process?
So there's still staff time in it, right?
Very little compared to what we had before because all of this is automated.
Okay. And so there's still getting charged for the cost of the item. So, I mean, how does that differ from the fines? the disproportionate effect of fines on,
So-
on certain groups of people? And, I mean, how is this different?
Yeah, so what's different about this is back to my previous slide here, 90% or 97% of the items that we have are returned on time. We would typically, before start the overdue notice process, the minute the item was overdue. So now we are not waiting, and we are now waiting until we get to that 30-day point before we are starting to try to recover those materials. Whereas before, we would start to try to recover those materials at week 1.
Okay.
So we're lengthening the amount of time because 97% of those items are coming in on time anyway.
Okay. Yes.
Could you go to the last slide, please?
Yes, ma'am.
So I understand we're getting rid of the fines. We're still charging if materials aren't put in. So if somebody at 30 days, we send them a bill, can they still check out new materials?
Depends on what the cost of the book is. So right now we block at $20. So if they have one book and that book is under $20, they're not blocked.
Okay.
It's when they hit that $20 threshold. Actually have a meeting tomorrow with the other Metro Library Network directors. Kelly will be there, some of our other operational staff, to talk about a little bit more of those specifics to see if $20 is still the right blocking when we move to this. So a lot of those finer details haven't been decided because we don't go live until July 1. So we certainly take a recommendation on those, but right now it's $20 and it depends on the material.
And what about checking out electronic items or movies? Will it be the same threshold, whatever you decide, or would you treat it differently? Because I know you've talked about new items coming in. I mean,
Sure.
this is the digital age, so the library resources are also changing. Can kiddos check out those cool little pads that you sent around here? And if so, are there fines for those, and how will that work with electronics?
Sure. So fine free is fine free with everything. Again, depending on the cost of the item. So for the launch pad that you're talking about, if they don't bring the launch pad back, they're automatically blocked based on the cost. Those are $100 a piece. So it just depends on the type of material that we have or what material there is. Something like a Wi-Fi hotspot, we already have plans in place for a Wi-Fi hotspot, in that those throttle down and become non-usable if someone takes them and keeps them. So we haven't seen that happening with something like a Wi-Fi hotspot because it's useless to them after so many days. Those are also, we have a plan with Verizon that if those items don't get returned, they're replaced back to us at no charge.
Okay.
So a couple of the different vendors, it just depends on what the item is and what is happening.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions?
I have one more slide,
Oh,
Mayor, I
sorry.
apologize. So I did want to, because this is always the question, is how does this impact our budget? For us, I'm excited about the budget cycle for once. We have really done some good work on increasing our revenue at the library, so we have some good stories to share with you guys when we come forward in the revenue or the budget process. One big thing that came forward that will help us offset the cost of this year is that we have an increase in our ILL reimbursement. It's almost the exact amount of money that we would have received in revenue. I will tell you that I will say thank you to Lon. He's been a great partner with me in this conversation as we've been working through this as the Metro Library Network. He has always been supportive of us making this move. The revenue that we get from fines is not dependable revenue. Right? We never know how much we're going to get. That's not something that we can plan on from year to year, although it is revenue into the city general fund. However, this ILL reimbursement, we recently found that we were, in previous years, reporting some of our stats incorrectly to the state, and they owe us back now an additional $40,000 starting this year. So we had a really great kind of wash of income that will be coming in now for the library. We also were able to procure reimbursement for 50% of one of our employees from the foundation, who they are now reimbursing 50% of Nora Hammond's salary as she will continue to build the foundation and eventually become cost neutral. She will be self-sustaining with the foundation, and we will regain that headcount back into the library. We have increased support from the Friends of the Library, and Kelly and I have been working really hard to work on cost reductions and try to shore things up in partnership with the city and some ideas that we have for procurement consolidation and all that as well. However, I do want to just point out that state ILL reimbursement took care of it for us 100% this year. Now, Mayor, I'm done.
Questions?
will say we've had very positive feedback from the community. If you guys saw the article in the Gazette, they were really supportive. We've had a lot of support from our patrons and past library employees, teachers, the public, so it's been a really positive move.
I do have one question. You had some alarming statistics of how many people were blocked based on the policy. How will you reach out to them to let them know, or have you already? And what kind
I'm
of feedback
so
have
glad that
gotten?
you asked that question, because Kelly wanted me to make sure that I did not forget to tell you all that we see crazy things happen when this gets announced to the community. So we are working on our communication plan with the Metro Library Network starting tomorrow. In Chicago and some of the other municipalities, or in the other public library settings that this has happened, they've seen thousands upon thousands of materials returned to the library the day after the fine-free policy goes into effect. We have people that have not come to the library in years and years and years that come back. So we are really kind of bracing for a summer kind of influx, but we are working on a communication plan in conjunction with the other 3 libraries, and it'll be an interesting thing to follow. We'll report out on it because I think it's a phenomenon that lots of libraries and municipalities are following throughout the U.S.
Other questions?
Good change.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think that is the final item for discussion this evening. Thank you. We'll see everyone on Thursday. Meeting's adjourned.